I think putting a little teaser, if you will, in the resume could lead to some great further questions in the interview stage.
Thanks for everyone for joining us today on the podcast. For those of you who are new here, I'm Eric Allen, General Manager here at Magoosh, and work with our Access business. Magoosh is an educational technology company that aims to level the playing field by providing high quality, affordable test prep and admission support. And if you enjoy our podcast today, which hopefully you will, don't forget to subscribe so you can know when the next episode is coming. Man, excited to have Phil here with us today from Notre Dame to talk all things MBA. Phil, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Eric. How's your day so far?
It's so far so good, but it's early, so we'll see what happens. But look, why don't you tell us your name, title, your role at Notre Dame, and also you can either tell us like how you got in the industry or maybe like what you love most about your job, like whichever one you wanna take.
All right, sounds good. So my name is Phil Drendall. I am Associate Director of Admissions here at Notre Dame, working with the MBA program. That role is pretty wide. So I travel, I do virtual events, I'm on podcasts like this, kind of recruiting for the program, looking for amazing candidates that are looking to apply to the program. I'm part of the MBA admissions committee, so doing some evaluation with applications, doing the virtual interview piece, and then a part of ultimately the final decision committee as well. But then, once you're admitted, it doesn't stop there. I'm in touch with you throughout, your time waiting until the program starts. And I work with current students to do some admissions enrollment initiatives and stuff like that as well. How I got here, man, it's a crazy story, I guess. Like, it's a non-traditional path, and it's been great. So I am from South Bend, Indiana, here where Notre Dame is located. Grew up in the area, went to Notre Dame as an undergrad, and graduated in psychology in 2008. Not the best time necessarily to graduate with a general degree in psychology and no plans to go to grad school. So after I graduated, I actually ended up in South Korea for about 9.5 years. I was an English teacher there. I wrote textbooks for 6 months, helped start a school in Seoul. I was a university professor for a couple years. I worked university administration. After 9.5 years, came back to the States, decided to use that psychology major. I was a case manager and skills trainer for adults with mental disorders living here in the South Bend area. At the same time, working on my higher education master's program, which was a part-time program, but it required an internship. So I, had connections still here at Notre Dame, reached out to the Mendoza College of Business, see if they wanted some intern help, started in an admissions internship and grew from there, spent a little bit of time with the student services team. And ultimately, after that program ended, after I got my master's degree, was hired on full time. And I've been at Mendoza for about 4.5, going on 5 years right now. And all of that is possible because of the Notre Dame network. My first job out of undergrad in South Korea was through someone that lived in my dorm with me during my time at Notre Dame. My second job in Korea was through the Notre Dame network. My first job coming back to the States, the internship here at Notre Dame, all through that Notre Dame network that we're really known for. And it's just something that I'm hoping to pay it forward and pass along to other amazing candidates that come through.
No, that's awesome. And Notre Dame is one of those brands you see in airports, not just domestically in the U.S., but all over the world. So, and we'll talk more about some of the value proposition of Mendoza a little bit later. But I'm excited to kind of take on our main topic question today, which is resume. The resume is kind of one of those things that often overlooked, but frankly, like a really, really important part of the application process. If you think about it, I know in the Mendoza application process, resume is used as you're interviewing for your student candidates, along with your staff who are going to be looking at that and really trying to understand their story. So let's jump into it. First question is, when you look at a resume, like how do you use the resume as part of the overall application? Like how do you specifically as an evaluator kind of use that as a tool?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the resume itself is kind of a key to unlocking a lot more depth into the application. Ultimately, with an MBA program, we're really focused on helping you reach that next step in your career. We typically see candidates with 3 to 8 years of full time work experience, sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more. But ultimately, the resume shows how an MBA is going to help you reach those career goals. It's not only showing, which companies you're working at, how long you've been working, but what is your progression within the professional space? Have you stayed at one company and kind of worked your way up the ladder? Have you bopped around a bit? Both of which are totally fine and add depth of context to your application, and ultimately shows how an MBA program is going to help you reach your overall career goals and how your past fits into that arc right there.
Yeah, like when I look at resumes, I see good resumes are kind of like they're like summaries. They have the useful information or whatever, but great resumes are impact tools. So, like, what recommendations do you have for someone to go from a summary, like these are all the things that I did, accomplished, whatever, to really impact specific to the candidate, right? Because it's a fine line between just kind of listing the things you did and like listing the impact that you made in particular jobs or in extracurriculars, et cetera. So, like, what are some of the tip strategies around that?
First, I would probably say selectivity in what you share on the resume is important. Ultimately, we are looking in our application for a one-page resume. Some candidates, that's easier than others, but showing what you were able to accomplish in those roles, what leadership roles did you take on, what were you a part of, outside of just your direct function, were you part of any employee resource groups or volunteer efforts through the company, shows greater impact and potential for community fit and uh, you know adding to the community here in your resume. But I think you can't just throw everything on there and hope that the committee sees the picture. Part of the skills that you learn in an MBA program, and we have career coaches who work on this with our students all the time, is crafting your resume to reflect what you're hoping for afterwards. So part of looking at how can your resume create an impact is thinking about the next step after. What do you want to put next on your resume after your MBA experience? And so highlighting particular functions that you have experience with that tie to that experience is going to be great. I mentioned leadership roles, any projects that you took a part of. It's okay to have a short summary at the beginning, but I think ultimately you want to craft your resume to show relevance for, again, how an MBA program is going to fit in.
I love that. And one of the things you mentioned was the importance of a one-page resume. I get a lot of questions, Phil, around like, oh, like there's no way I can do a one-page resume. And like I'm like, man, this might be one of the easier ones, right? So, like, how do you help people, think through what they can take out, right? Because you talked about that selectivity. What are some of the things maybe that you see that you're like, this is not relevant? Like, you could have left this out. I would have loved to have learned more about this, this, and this. Maybe some of the key takeaways that you see from all the resumes that you see where you're like, yeah, this is definitely not needed. These are some areas where you can definitely cut down, really look at these particular areas.
Yeah, I think, first of all, if you have a lot of work experience, if you've done a lot of great things in your career, which is probably why you're looking to apply to an MBA program, anyways, thinking about what makes sense to list first is going to be important. So, we see often like I worked on X project and generated revenue of Y number, however, millions of dollars. And that's great. That's an amazing accomplishment. That's definitely something you can share in an interview or maybe in an essay. But if you're just looking at a very quick glance of the summary, those numbers are maybe not as important. Um, Sometimes I still see things like high school accomplishments. Not to take away from any of those high school accomplishments, you worked hard for those. Definitely worth sharing. Again, maybe in an interview, especially at the MBA stage. High school GPA, high school projects, not as relevant at this stage. but it's a great depth as part of your story. When you're telling your story, include that, that your high school accomplishments there, maybe not on your resume when you're trying to be concise. You can still include things like, of course, your education. You don't need to go so in depth there. If we see your school and your major, and if you had any Latin honors or your GPA, you can include those. But be mindful that, like, the work piece is really what we're looking for, and you don't need to cram everything so small, size 4 font and whatever to fit it all in. Think carefully about what you want the admissions committee and ultimately what you want your hiring, partners for your next step to know about you, so that they can ask about it, and then you can expand. Use your interview as a tool to make your resume more in depth.
No, that's great. So it's almost like this is just the start. Like, don't try to like say everything all in one resume. Like, this is just kind of a conversation starter, if you will. And I love, the high school piece. It's like, as I get older, Phil, like my accomplishments in high school just continue to grow. Like, and I don't really know how that works because I haven't been there in a while. But like, the one thing I did is now even better and better and bigger. So certainly, as time goes by, those items become less relevant. You talked about some of the things you definitely should do, like to improve the resume. Is there anything that you've seen over the years you're like, man, like I see this mistake and it's just a deal killer for a candidate, at least in the from the resume standpoint? Like, definitely don't do that. We talked about the importance of staying to one page and being selective. But is there anything else that you can think of where you're like, man, this is like a big mistake when I see that, and maybe you see it, frequently enough?
Yeah, and I won't say that there's any particular piece of a resume that the committee will see and automatically say, no, you're not it. Obviously, it's just one piece of a holistic review. But other than the high school piece, the stylized resume, I think there is something about the stylization. Using colors in your resume can be fine. Be mindful that not everyone needs to see a pink resume with bright purple font. Sometimes that's hard to read if you think about ADA capabilities and just the way that people that are colorblind maybe will perceive it there. Not saying like you can use some creative license. And again, if you're going for a creative role, maybe a marketing role, having a little bit more creativity on your resume is not necessarily a bad thing. But like I said, you don't need to have super small font. Don't try to have bullet points and sub bullet points everywhere, because then it just becomes convoluted, a little bit hard to read. There are also some differences between maybe a Microsoft Word document, and then if you upload it to Google Docs or download it as a PDF, it's going to change the formatting there as well. So make sure that you review your resume after you save it as whatever file format needs to be sent through, to make sure it still looks okay. Because the worst feeling, and I've done this before as well, is when you have the title over here and the date you were there, but the spacing is messed up, so now everything is switched up, and it doesn't look professional there. So making sure to review what the format looks like before you hit submit is great. Another section, we see interests or hobbies. That's fine. You can have a small line there. Don't focus too much. Like if you were the two-time cross-country ski champ of St. Joseph County, that's cool. You can include cross-country skiing on your resume, but if you're already nervous about fitting everything into the resume, that might be something you think about, tossing aside and letting the other sections of the applications, giving you room for that. Ultimately, in our application and a lot of other applications, there is a separate employment section where you can be a little bit more in depth. You can go over one page. And a lot of people complain, oh, I already have the resume. You see what I've done. Why do I need to fill out this employment section as well? In cases like this, where you want to say something a little bit more, where you can be a little bit more in depth, where you can include everything you've done instead of kind of the relevant version, that employment section is golden as well.
I'm chuckling at the pink. I'm still thinking about the pink res. I'm like, Barbie, great as a movie, maybe not so good as a resume. So that's. Have you ever gotten like a green and gold like
We've
like
gotten green
resume
and
or something?
yeah, like green and beige. I think sometimes people also try to play up to the Notre Dame side of things. Like if you want to put a golden dome on your resume, that's cool. If you want to put a football helmet, that's great. Probably not necessary for the next stage of your application. We have a lot of proud alumni though, so I don't know.
Yeah. Great. So that was really helpful. And last question on resume. I do get this question a lot, especially this year, around how does one demonstrate distance traveled, right? So an MBA is about having business leaders for the future. It's about things like resilience and perseverance. And candidates, frankly, want to be able to tell that story and across their application. Do you have any suggestion for how candidates can speak to maybe some of the things that they've had to overcome, some of the things that they've had to get through in order to accomplish what they've accomplished? Or do you think that that's maybe best served for contextual opportunities like interviews and other opportunities? What's your advice on that?
I think both can be possible. I think putting a little teaser, if you will, in the resume could lead to some great further questions in the interview stage. So, including any work experience or club involvement, maybe while you were an undergrad, if you were working full time while going to school full time, that's definitely something the admissions committee would love to know about. If you had a non-traditional past, or you want to show the work that you put into getting to where you are, that's something that you can highlight on your resume as well. We see a lot of resumes with a very short summary section. So if you have at the top your name and maybe your email address and contact information, and then just like a couple sentence summary, that could also be a place to kind of be a little bit more thoughtful and add some depth as far as coming from X background and doing this during uh, undergraduate or associate's degree or whatever, is going to give a little bit more in depth and show maybe some of the miles traveled. I like that phrase that you mentioned, to get to where you are today. I don't think you need to, again, go too in depth there, but if you have enough there that piques the interest of the admissions committee or the interview team so that they can then ask more, that's a great opportunity. And there are other aspects of the application, the supplemental essay, or other ways for you to tell your story that can then tie to the resume and add some additional context.
All right, love that. So, some of the things that we talked about, like be succinct, try to get your point across. This is not an exhaustive opportunity. It's really more of an opportunity to just kind of set the stage and begin the conversation. Be selective in what you put on the resume, and also maybe connect it in with the things that you want to be able to do. Kind of in the future, right? And just really be thoughtful about kind of your approach to the types of content that you want to put in there. And so you can put a resume together that really does what it's supposed to do, which is like give some context, give some general information, give a broader overview, and maybe kind of tie it all in. That ties in really nicely with your application and your interview. So that is really, really helpful, and some great advice for our podcast audience. Let's switch. We've had an opportunity to tease a little bit about Mendoza. I wanna really talk about first, before we even get into specific questions. Um, I've had a chance to visit campus. For those who haven't, it is just a special place. You've gone to school there. You've now worked there. Could you sum up like what makes it special for someone who hasn't been there, for someone who hasn't experienced what Notre Dame is all about? What is it that makes it special about being in South Bend?
Yeah, the campus itself, it is a special place, and it could be the architecture, it could be, the art museums around here, it could be the lakes on campus, the iconic buildings like the football stadium and the Golden Dome that are just so accessible here on campus. But it really is ultimately a collaborative place that's really open to everyone that wants to be here. There are constantly, events, clubs, concerts, guest speakers going on at all times that are open to the public. They're open to all Notre Dame students. And it's really a place that we try to make inclusive to everyone. Whether you're in the MBA program or you're getting your master's of sacred music, or you're a PhD student in electrical engineering, or an undergrad who's majoring in psychology or architecture. You're a part of the Notre Dame family. We talk a lot about the Notre Dame family. So we want to provide a lot of opportunities for you to get involved on campus, for you to integrate with other departments and other areas here on campus. And I feel like that sense is felt when you step on campus. You see students that are, you know, I want to say it's like a Midwest thing. I want to say it's a Notre Dame thing, but like they're smiling going to campus. You see a lot of Notre Dame gear on campus, a lot of students that are proud of their school. And I think that just kind of emanates throughout the campus vibes as well.
All right, and thinking specifically about the business school. So, you go to a tour or you go look online and look at YouTube or whatever. It can be so challenging to really differentiate as a candidate the various schools. What would you say is kind of the main points of differentiation for Mendoza?
Yeah, first of all, I would probably say our mission at Mendoza of growing the good in business is something we take seriously. Notre Dame is a Catholic institution. We were founded by a group of French missionaries back in 1842, and they had this vision of the school being a force for good in the world. That's something that we've really, taken and run with here at the business school. We've been in existence for just over 100 years with our business school, and we really tie our vision, our mission to that original mission of Notre Dame with growing the good in business. We believe that our students, given the amazing backgrounds and skills that they bring to the table, add to that the resources, the alumni network, the curriculum here at Notre Dame, they're going to go forward and make a positive impact on others, whether it's at an individual level, a local community level, or a broader global level. So I would say that mission, it's something that we look for in the application process. We look for it in the interview. I mentioned before, we're hoping for community involvement, club involvement here. It's something we really expect of our students, and we really encourage them to explore development outside of the classroom. So that's one big thing I think that sets us apart. We're a very collaborative program. We're relatively small compared to our career and compared to our competitors. About 120 in each year of the MBA program. So lots of opportunity for you to share your unique perspectives and backgrounds, as well as to learn from your amazing classmates and professors. We're also very much emphasizing experiential learning, lots of hands-on opportunities for you to apply what you learned in the classroom in a variety of different ways. So this can look like taking a $10 million chunk of the Notre Dame endowment and saying, go invest in our applied investment management program, or running digital marketing campaigns for other master's programs here in the business school in your applied digital marketing class, or traveling around the country or the world in our Meyer Business on the Front Lines programs, where you're working with small local groups, boots on the ground, that are looking to enhance their community, and just lots of different ways for you to again apply what you learn in the classroom while keeping that mission of Notre Dame and Mendoza in mind.
Creating, like, that's a very defined culture, and creating that culture takes time and effort, but also creating that culture takes recruiting, right? So your job is important to find the right people to make sure they fit in that environment of mission driven, applied learning, collaborative, et cetera. What do you do in the application process to find those candidates, or is there a different way that you maybe assess candidates or look at different things? Can you help, someone who's thinking about Notre Dame really understand, like, what's really important for me to articulate to you and your team to make sure that comes across as a fit?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, highlighting community service opportunities you've been a part of, or extracurriculars, or volunteer work in your application. This can show up on your resume, but we also have a separate activities section for you to really show community involvement. Chances are the admissions committee will think, if you were involved previously, if you're currently involved, in your company and in your community, When you get here to Notre Dame, you're going to do the same thing. And then at the next stage, you're going to be that involved alumni of Notre Dame that people are going to say, yeah, that's Notre Dame for you. They're always like leading the charge with the volunteer work, or they're really involved in, their women in business ERG or something like that as well. So that's one way that you can do that. The statement of purpose section in the application is going to be a good chance for you to show not only why are you interested in an MBA and what are your career goals, but what specifically about Notre Dame really speaks to you. In the admissions process, we're looking for diverse backgrounds and cohort cohesion. With different people, everyone can bring something unique to the table. We have a slideshow presentation that allows you to highlight just that. It's 4 slides. Pictures are great. Go light on the words, I would say, but it's a chance for you to show who you are, what makes you, different than everyone else. What are you passionate about? What are your hobbies? And this really helps the admissions committee show that how you fit into the cohort. What can you bring? What special background or passions can you bring to the cohort? And then finally, the interview is a great way for you to connect with someone from the admissions team, potentially connect with a current student or an alum of the program, and just really show how you've researched Notre Dame and how you fit in that Notre Dame legacy.
Awesome. When candidates are looking at applications, sometimes they can't get on campus. They can't experience some of the things that you're talking about. That's just a little easier to experience, when you're on campus and speaking with students. What's something that you would say applicants should know about Mendoza that it's kind of difficult to find on the website? Just something that maybe really hits you when you're on campus talking to the students, interacting with the staff, the professors, et cetera.
I think it's just how collaborative the cohort is here at Mendoza. And part of that could be due to the size of the program. 120 students, we want you to get to know everyone in the MBA program, not only in your year, but in the second year of the MBA as well. You get to know everyone there. You get to know what your professors. We've had professors that have invited groups of students out for CrossFit or Orange Theory on the weekends, and we have a group of students who meet professors out there. Or sometimes they'll host small group dinners at their house on campus. You really get to know your faculty members outside of the classroom. But the students are also very involved and hang out with each other. There is an MBA bowling league that has really become popular the last few years, and they rent out the entire 30-lane bowling alley near campus. And there are over 100 MBA students that just take over this place every Tuesday here. And I've not been invited. I'm waiting for my invite patiently here, but it looks like so much fun. Different teams dress up as like different costumes and stuff. But that's typical of our Notre Dame, of our MBA experience. You get to know your classmates out of the classroom. You hang out with them. A lot of students will bring partners or spouses or families to campus. They're a part of the experience as well. We want them to feel welcome. So a lot of times they'll have family gatherings as well, or picnics. We host a family-oriented picnic during orientation as well for families to get to know each other. You can Google it and you can hear alumni reviews saying I made my best friends and closest connections during the MBA program, or, it was great sitting with my fellow MBA students at Notre Dame home football games every week. But until you get here and you walk into the classroom buildings and just see people chatting, smiling, hanging out with each other on a Friday afternoon at 4 p.m., it doesn't really hit you until you're like, man, these people really like each other and they really do get close with each other.
Yeah, and I would imagine, what you talked about with that collegial environment, that's all of what Mendoza is all about, which kind of is in the classroom and outside the classroom, it sounds like. So that's fantastic. All right, I'm gonna put you on the hot seat a little bit, so prepare yourself. This could be a challenge. When you think about the most important elements, right? Like everyone's like, oh, everything's important. I get that, but if I were to force you to think about the most important elements of the application, I'm not gonna have you mention it just yet, but what are some of the things that in an application a candidate may overvalue or undervalue, right? So you're constantly getting questioned about that. And in your mind, you're like, that is just, I mean, it's important, but it's like that, gosh, you really should be thinking about something that you're not asking me about. So help me understand one element of the application process, maybe that is overvalued, and one element that you wish people would maybe spend more time thinking about or putting attention towards.
That's a good question. All right, I'm going to start with the undervalued piece first. I think people don't emphasize the statement of purpose section enough. In our application, we say it's 100 words or less. Tell us about why you want to get an MBA from us and what your career goals are. But the amount of time that the admissions committee really evaluates that statement of purpose, the amount of times that it's brought up again in the interview for clarification is, I can't count, because ultimately that little blurb is going to be kind of the framework for how we view your fit in the program, and also how we can maybe see how our MBA program is going to assist you. If the fit isn't there, if you say, I want to be a scout for NFL football and specifically the Philadelphia Eagles, I want to scout there. Our program probably isn't the best fit for you. We have a master's of business analytics focusing in sports analytics. That program may be a little bit better. Um, but if that's what you put in your statement of purpose, automatically the admissions committee is going to review your application as, I don't know if we can help this person achieve their career goals. So really spending the time to be as specific as possible, maybe have a couple of companies that you mention, but really explaining the function that you're looking to do, that will unlock a lot of opportunities for you to then go into depth during your interview, or in other areas of your application there. If you're vague and you just say, I love Notre Dame, I grew up a Notre Dame football fan, I can't wait to go to a football game. That's cool. That's great. If you're a student here, you can go to football games, but ultimately it doesn't show what we're looking for as far as your academic success, your career success in the program. So pay attention to that statement of purpose, be as specific as possible, especially with your career goals, and your why Notre Dame there. As far as what is overvalued, I think the letters of recommendation are, a lot of people stress over those letters of recommendation. They really think carefully, like, okay, I need to find the perfect recommender. Let me work to get the CEO of my company to write this perfect letter, or I'm going to scour my entire network and find the Notre Dame alum who's just going to be, that chef's kiss on top of my resume to make it there. Recommendations are great. They're helpful. They help highlight strengths that you displayed in a professional setting, in an academic setting, in an extracurricular setting. But ultimately, those recommenders, we're hoping that they say something good about you. If you've chosen your recommenders correctly, if you've talked to them beforehand about why you're interested in an MBA and why from Notre Dame, they should hopefully, be able to write a letter that ultimately says, yeah, this person's good. They were good for me. They're going to be good for you. If you have a recommender who doesn't say that you're good, or say this person's going to be a big problem in the program, I don't recommend them. I would reevaluate who you're asking to support you there. But their words aren't going to make or break your application at all. They can add some depth, add some character to your application, your background. I think they can really show, and we use the GMAT common letter of recommendation. So there are some drop downs and some free, free response sections that can really highlight strengths of yours as an applicant. But ultimately, the admissions committee sees so many more pieces of information from your past, from your present, what you're hoping to do in the future, that maybe your recommender doesn't see, that we just want to make sure everything aligns there. So Don't stress too much about the letters of recommendation. Yes, we ask for two, and they are a required section of your application materials. But as long as you do your due diligence beforehand, you're going to be fine.
Awesome. On that note, for recommenders, I think it's kind of like you said, if you choose great recommenders, you kind of should feel comfortable that they're going to handle their business. What you talk about, some of the things that you would recommend is like, don't stretch on recommenders. Don't find people who don't know you well. But any advice on like who you actually should choose, and then when you choose them, you talked about that additional context that they can provide that can be valuable in some ways, especially when you talk about, I don't want to say commodity necessarily, but like kind of a typical undergraduate background of consulting or general corporate or whatever. What kinds of things can you do to speak to your recommenders about that can actually help you in the advocacy process of the application? So choosing recommenders and best way to kind of get them to support your story.
Yeah. So first of all, reach out to your recommenders before you have the form sent to them. That's going to be number one. Nothing. So in our application, and a lot of other schools are like this as well, you don't need to collect the recommendation letters from them before you apply. We actually send them a form directly. They send it back to us. This helps with confidentiality, but also takes one less thing off your plate. But if they get this form all of a sudden in their email inbox from Notre Dame for you getting an MBA, and you haven't talked to them, there are going to be some questions of what's going on. So meet with them ahead of time. Eric mentioned, what can you prepare them with, basically? I think just having, a quick coffee or a quick chat about, again, why is an MBA important to you? Maybe reminding them of some of the projects you worked on under them, or what you've been able to accomplish, is going to really help them write a relevant letter of recommendation for you. And ultimately, who you choose is important in that we want you to choose someone that knows you well, worked with you closely, as opposed to someone with a fancy title that maybe can't pick you out of a lineup. So a direct supervisor who worked with you for a number of months or years is going to be better than the COO of a company who you maybe interacted with twice, but doesn't really know you and can't really speak to all of your accomplishments that you're able to do. Former supervisors are absolutely fine. We get the question a lot of, I just started this job like 6 months ago. I don't really want my boss to know that I'm already shopping and looking to leave. Is it okay if I have a former supervisor? Absolutely. Make sure, again, that they can speak to your skills. Having a professor or academic advisor is great, but if you've been out of school for 5 years and haven't kept in contact with them, maybe it's not the most relevant. Like, yeah, they can look you up and say, Johnny got a B in my class, and I don't have that he was late very often, but that's kind of expected at the MBA level, right? So if you don't have a relevant academic resource that you can go back to write a recommendation letter, that's fine. If you're involved in community service efforts or NGOs, use someone from there. Use someone from your current work, maybe a different supervisor or someone you worked closely with during your company. And ultimately, that's going to be the person that shares the most relevant information.
All right, let's talk about the interview. First of all, I'd love for you to speak specifically about the interview process at Mendoza, how it works. But what recommendations do you have for candidates to really stand out in their interview process with Mendoza?
When you ask for the interview process, are you saying like from submission, application, and how we get to the interview, or just
No,
focusing?
really, actually. So now fast forward to, hey, I have an interview.
Okay.
I'm preparing for it. What's the process at Mendoza? How does it actually work? And then, what are some of the things that you would recommend that a candidate think about as they're kind of preparing for that moment?
Absolutely. So the interviews at Notre Dame, they're all done virtually so that we can have equal access to everyone, no matter where you're calling in from. Interviews last about 35 to 40 minutes. Typically, you'll have 2 people in the interview room with you during an MBA interview. So this is a current member of the admissions team, so myself or one of my colleagues who have seen your application, or at the very least they've seen your resume. So going back to the resume piece, this is a great plug for paying attention to all those great resume tips out there. But then you're also going to have either a current student, an alum from the program, or someone who works at Mendoza, but maybe not directly in the admissions office, who have not seen your application or resume. They're coming in blind to allow you to more organically tell your story, where you're coming from. It's a very conversational interview. Typically, we go back and forth with a current student or alum asking questions, and of course, leave time at the end for questions that you have. But in preparing for the interview, think of it like a normal job or internship interview. Dress the part, right? Don't wear a hoodie or something to the interview. I have to be dressed in a suit and tie. At the very least, expect you to have a nice collared shirt on or something like that during the interview, or a blouse or something that looks business professional at the very least. Secondly, think of the typical questions that you'll be asked in an interview for a job. Why are you interested in this company? Why are you interested in Notre Dame? Why are you interested in this role? Why are you interested in an MBA? Those are easy questions that you'll be asked no matter what the school is, no matter what the job is. So if you have that on lock and you can just like recite it and kind of show that depth of who you are in that introduction, start with a solid foundation, you're good the rest of the way out. And then every job interview, every school interview is going to leave time for questions at the end. Have a couple prepared questions, whether you're taking notes during the interview itself to go back and ask about particular things, or if you have some prepared questions about specific clubs or opportunities that you've researched, or you're just really curious about alumni or something like that. Having a couple questions is going to be great, especially if you're doing an interview with a current student or an alum. Ask them about their experience. They bring something to the table and they bring something to the interview that I don't, because they're having more recent or relevant MBA specific classroom experience. So ask them questions, make them feel involved, and this is part of the networking piece as well. Finally, do your research into the program. No matter which program you're applying to, if you're in the interview, mention specifics about that program. Don't just be vague and say, oh yeah, do you have a consulting club? Most places have a consulting club for the MBA program, but ask about specific things. Hey, I saw this cool Meyer Business on the Frontlines program. Can you tell me more about that? Or I really see that your Women in Business Club, your Black Graduates in Management Club, your LGBTQ plus and Allies Club did this event in the fall. How can I get involved? Or what are club experiences like? If you mention that, it shows us, hey, they've done their research. They're into Notre Dame. They're not just applying to 10 schools.
I love that advice, really being specific, and also like, because it is somewhat of a unique process to have potentially students as well as staff. Oftentimes, you require different questions for the different people, right? Like the students are very experiential, right? They can give specific examples or feedback or thoughts on their experience at Mendoza, whereas the staff may not, if they hadn't gone there, which most staff have not been in the same business program that they represent, would have a different perspective. So that was really helpful, hopefully, to the audience there. All right, let's change up things a little bit and really get a peek inside the admissions committee. So you're part of the admissions committee. A lot of people do get anxious around this, like, it's like this black box. Like, how does it work? Why don't you start with maybe walking us through what the admissions committee looks like? So an application gets submitted. What happens to, like, this is like the journey of the application at Mendoza. What happens? How does it get processed? Where do you see it? Who looks at it? And then we'll kind of dive into some specific questions around that.
All right. So from submitting your application, Once you have all of your materials in, your application is 100% complete, it is then sent to two different readers who aren't able to see each other's comments. So one reader is typically from the admissions team. Usually it's myself or my colleague Nora or someone else who works closely with the MBA. And then it goes through a second read, either another MBA admissions committee member or another person from the overarching admissions team. Once those two reads are completed, they will indicate on there if yes, this person should be interviewed, or no, they should not. If both readers unanimously said yes, they're interviewed, they're automatically sent to an interview invitation for that to be scheduled. If one says yes, but the other says no, or if both of them say no, it goes to an interview committee where the MBA admissions committee meets, talks it over, sees what the comments were from the application reads, and then decide, what, we like this particular thing that we see. Let's go ahead and invite them to interview. Or we say at this time, maybe another year of work is going to be more helpful. Or maybe if they retake the GRE or GMAT and get a higher score next year, they can come back to us and we'll send them to deny. So from the interview stage, so you have the yeses for interview, or those that the committee said, let's look a little bit more closely. From the interview, you complete it. It then goes back to committee with the interview notes for the final evaluation of the application. And the MBA admissions committee will then look at every single application one by one and basically say, yes, you're in. Waitlist, let's either ask for a contingency like retake the GMAT, or maybe we just waitlist and say we want to see what other applications come through later in the cycle, or we will deny at that point. From there, for those that were admitted to the program, it then goes to the committee once more for a third review of your application for scholarship designation. We offer both merit-based and need-based scholarships in the program. We combine that into one scholarship award. And then your decision is released. So from start of submission to your application to when you receive your decision, typically about 6 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks for the entire process.
All right. So that's extensive, and it's also fabulous that you kind of have that many touch points for the candidate. So when you look at the actual application itself, walk us through what you're looking to get out of, maybe like specifically within the essays. What are you looking to get out of some of those things? What are you looking for? What are you looking to pull out of that? We talked about some of those things, but maybe help us understand, and you can go into detail or you can kind of keep it at a general level. It's up to you.
Sure. So first thing we're looking for probably is academic readiness. Are you ready for a rigorous program like ours? Things we're looking at are undergraduate transcripts, GRE or GMAT scores. Are you doing quantitative stuff in your work right now? We look at your quant courses as an undergrad. So your math classes, your econ classes, if you're in engineering classes, there is a strong correlation between doing well in those quant courses and doing well in an MBA program. So we look at that. If your GPA is a little bit lower, a test score is a great way to show the committee, hey, I'm ready for a program like yours at this moment in my life. So there's number one. Number two is probably career outcome potential and fitting within our program. That's where the resume piece comes in. That's where that statement of purpose piece comes in that I mentioned there. And then that mission fit. We're looking for community involvement that I mentioned before. How are you involved? Are you, looking to do a lot of community service? Were you involved in clubs as an undergraduate student as well? Are you still involved after graduating from undergrad?
So when you think through the application process, I guess this is also another hot seat. I lied. I guess I said I got you off the hot seat. You're back on. Interview, resume, essays, all of it. Is there something where you're like, this is if I hooked you up to a lie detector, like what would you say is like kind of the most important part of that process? If you could, I mean, maybe you can't.
We do review every application holistically, but I would probably say the top two, and they're probably tied, are academic readiness, so GPA and test score, and then career goals and your resume. What have you been doing? And then what are you hoping to do afterwards? And if you can show how the MBA fits into that career pathway, especially our MBA, that's what we're looking for a lot. Community service is great. Um, but everyone has their own background. Maybe, as we mentioned before, you were working full time during your undergraduate program, you couldn't have been involved in clubs. That's fine. We understand that. But if you working full time made you have a GPA of like 2.5 out of 4, that's another story. So probably that academic readiness piece and the career readiness piece are what we are looking at very closely.
Excellent. So, one thing before we conclude, I'd like to talk about life on campus. What is it like to be a student in the MBA program in Mendoza? For example, where do people live? Is it like on campus housing? Where do they? What building do they stay in? Are they all together? Is it multiple buildings? Give the podcast listener today kind of a little bit of an understanding of kind of what's it like to be on campus, where are they located, where do they spend their time, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, so first of all, South Bend, Indiana, we are about 90 miles away from Chicago. We're about 5 miles south of the Michigan border. So if you got a vision of the map of the United States, we are right at the very top central part of Indiana here. South Bend is it's not a huge city, but it's also not a very small city. Usually it's about 150,000 people in South Bend and the surrounding areas. So definitely not small rural town or anything like that. We have trains that go to downtown Chicago multiple times a day from our international airport here in town. Indianapolis is only a couple hours away. Detroit is about 3 hours away as well. So South Bend, I'd like to say, has everything that you need, some things that you want, but if you really want uh, that big city feeling, Chicago's always very accessible here as well. Life on campus, I would say probably about 80% of students live off campus. We do have either on campus or off campus housing. Our on campus housing is specifically for graduate students. It's basically just an apartment complex on campus reserved for graduate students. And then our off campus housing, um, where Mendoza and the Stayer Center are located, which is where you will spend 99% of your time here on campus in the classroom setting, is at the very southern edge of campus. So we have a lot of different apartment complexes surrounding campus. And so a couple of key ones that we see, the Foundry, the Overlook, Irish Row, they're all pretty close to campus. You can walk to campus from those off campus apartments in 5 to 10 minutes. And actually, the on campus housing is for graduate students is a little further away than that. So you can walk from there to Mendoza in usually about 15 minutes. Everything is quite walkable. Campus is closed off to cars, so you don't have to worry about that. You don't need a car here as well. I'd probably say about 50% of MBA students, maybe a little more, have cars, but there are grocery stores, amenities close by here that are available to you and that you don't need a car. There are also city buses that Notre Dame students can ride for free with their Notre Dame ID that go around town here as well. But life on campus it's great right now. It's quiet. All the students are on their winter break. I'm jealous. I'm only a couple days away from that break myself. But um, when Eric mentioned earlier that he's been on campus and there's something special about it, we hear it a lot. I don't know what it is. There's something special here, but if you think to when the university was founded in 1842, it was founded in November of 1842. And if you've ever been in the Midwest for winter, you have to know there has to be something special about a place to decide in the middle of November that, like, hey, this is where I want to settle down and start a university. So there's something about this land here, something about the area that just really speaks to people. And I love it here. Students say there is something magical about the buildings and the life here on campus.
Yes, as I said, it is a very special place, and you're probably right. Someone certainly saw something fabulous as it does get a little colder up there in November timeframe. But before we conclude, is there anything else that you'd like to say that we haven't gotten a chance to cover today? I feel like we went through quite a bit today, but if there's anything else that we can touch on, let's do it now.
Yeah, we did get quite in depth. And Eric, I've appreciated you being my partner throughout this podcast today. Ultimately, what I would say is, first of all, don't be afraid to apply to any school, but especially to Notre Dame. Yes, it has a reputation of being, an elite undergraduate institution and a strong MBA program as well. But we have students from such a wide range of backgrounds and majors and professional experiences and nationalities that come to our MBA program. We have students who said, I applied to Notre Dame as an undergrad. I didn't get in. I don't know if I can get in still. Apply. You never know, right? So like you've all done amazing things. We're looking for a very cohesive, collaborative, but also diverse cohort. It doesn't hurt to submit your application and give it a shot. So we talk a lot about imposter syndrome and fighting that. Don't let that imposter syndrome take over. It's always worth it to shoot your shot, as we say, and see how you can fit in. And ultimately, with this program, I would say, yes, it's very collaborative, but we want you to be a part of the Notre Dame family here. So at the end of the day, apply if you can, and we would love to see your application come through.
Yes, I definitely encourage that. And what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you when they're ready to think about applying?
Yeah, so we host a number of virtual events. We host some in-person events as well. But if you want to reach out directly to me, if you email mba.business@nd.edu, that is our MBA inbox here at Notre Dame, I will see your message come through. If you want to reach out to me directly, my personal email address here at Notre Dame is PDRENDAL. So like P Drendall, like my last name here on the screen, but take off the last L, at nd.edu. That will go to my direct inbox here. Happy to answer whatever follow-up questions you have, connect with you. On our webpage as well, tons of information. There's a way for you to connect with current student ambassadors on there. They're pretty responsive. LinkedIn is a great way for you to connect with alumni and hear about their story as well.
Phil, thank you so much for speaking with us today. Been a friend of the program and a supporter of ours, so really, really do appreciate your time today. I know our podcasters learned a lot from you today, so thank you for contributing to the Magoosh podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening to GradTalk MBA. Don't forget to subscribe to our Magoosh GMAT YouTube, and if you enjoyed this episode, hopefully you did. I know I did. Definitely check out Magoosh.com, learn more about our MBA admissions, our GMAT GRE products, and we look forward to seeing you on the next podcast. Take care, everybody.